Hello guys, and it's me again. That was a loud clap. And today I want to read this book, Some Kind of Courage by 𝒢ℯ𝓃𝒽𝒾𝓃𝓽, and the other is by The Honest Truth. Wow. And I didn't really get to find any audiobooks for this. So I was like, you know what? I'll make an audiobook for everyone else so that I don't have to be looking for it, or you don't have to be looking for it. I might do some more books because I'm really interested in books, but we'll get to it. Chapter 1, October 1890, Old Mission, Washington. I reckon it was the coldest, darkest hour of the night. That still Fort... Okay, we'll start over again. Sorry, big mistake. I reckon it was the coldest, darkest hour of the night. That still hour just before dawn. Mama always called it the angels and devils hour, on account of how only angels or demons would have any work worth doing at a time like that. I didn't know if it was doing the Lord's work or the devil's, but I knew that it had to be done, and the time had sure enough come to it. I'd been lying too many sleepless hours in my sorry straw-stuffed bed, waiting for the old man to finally fall dead asleep. My plan had been burning all night in my mind like the last glowing embers in the fireplace, keeping my heart awake. Truth be told, my hands were a bit shaky as I finally crept, as quiet as could be, across the cabin's dirt floor toward where he lay snoring. And it weren't just the cold making him shake neither, but my heart was as steady as a true horse heading toward home. My leather bag was already thrown over my shoulder. I'd slipped it on without him seeing before I curled up under my blanket, and my boots were still on my feet. He'd been too drunk to notice me not taking them off. All I needed was the money and the gun, and then to hit the trail running. Okay. The money was piled on a shelf up on the wall by his bed. I licked my lips and crept closer, my feet finding a path in the barely lit darkness. I could see the barrel of the pistol gleaming in the dim red light of the coals on the crate beneath the shelf. It was right within reach of the arm the old man had thrown across his face. I think when she's stating old man, because usually people say their old man is their dad. So I don't know if she is or he is talking about that, or like actually like a grandpa, or like just an old man in general. I don't know. Barely breathing, I took the last few steps and reached up with my left hand. My fingers closed around the crumpled stack of dirty green bags, and with a smooth and silent motion, I slipped them off the shelf. It ain't stealing, I told myself. The money belongs to me, by all rights. I ain't sure, I convinced myself, and doubt chewed on my insides. But there weren't no choice. I crouched and turned toward the pistol, but as I did, my foot kicked an empty booze bottle. It spun in the shadows and rattled against another one with a loud clink that shattered the quiet of the cabin. The old man's snoring stopped in mid-breath with a snort. His arms jerked up from his face, and two red eyes glared at me, confused but already angry. They narrowed when they saw the money clutched in my hand, and his top lip pulled back in a snarl. "What are you doing, boy?" he asked in his high, piercing whine of a voice. Lord, how I had learned to hear that voice of his. I froze, too scared to answer. He blinked, his drunken brain no doubt starting to make sense of what was happening. He started to sit up, and then he stopped. We both looked at the gun at the same time. There was one tight, breathless moment when we both knew what we were gonna do. Our bodies lunged and our hands struck like snakes. He was closer, but I was quicker. And when I stumbled back 2 steps, the gun was gripped tight in my right hand. It was his turn to freeze, and he did. "What are you doing, boy?" he asked. But now his voice had a sure enough nervous tremble in it. "You had no right to sell her," I said. I was ashamed of how my voice quivered. Not at all like a man's. Not at all like my papa's. The old man grimaced like he'd just taken a suck on a fresh lemon. "Of course I did, boy. She was mine, and I need the money to pay for all the food you eat." My underfed belly rumbled the truth to his lie, and I shook my head. "No, sir. I work for my keep, and I work hard, and that horse was mine. You got this money by selling my horse, so it's my money, and I'm going to use it to get her back. And you wouldn't be using this money for food neither, but for more bottles of Dutch John's brandy," I wanted to say. But my mama had taught me better manners than that, and I held my tongue. He slid his feet out of bed and sat up. I took another step back. "Give me my money and get back in bed," he said. "You ain't never gonna shoot me." He started to stand up, but stopped when I cocked the hammer of the gun back with a click that rang clear as a church bell on Sunday. "I will, sir," I said. "I sure enough will, Mr. Grissom. I ain't never shot a man, sir, and I hope I never do. But I'm gonna get my horse back. And if you try to stop me, I swear I will put a bullet in you." My voice still had that scared voice shake in it, but underneath the shake was a hardness that I know we both heard. An iron hardness that sounded an awful lot like the truth. His eyes squinted certainly at me. "Your pa left you in my care, boy, along with your horse, and my papa didn't have a choice. And I know he'd want me to go after her no matter what." I swallowed and hoped it was true. It was so hard to know. "But that's my gun. You can't take my gun." The high whine came back into his voice. I shook my head again. "No, sir. This was my papa's gun. He taught me to shoot with it." My voice caught in my throat, and I had to stop to swallow down the sadness that was always there, ready to rise up and choke me. "He wanted to be mine. If someone needs shooting, you've got your rifle." I stuffed the money into my bag and backed up to the plank door. I opened it with my free hand, the gun still raised between us. "You can't take all that money, boy. It's all I've got. I'll starve." Too bad now. I knew it wasn't true, but I paused there in the doorway. It's sure enough that sometimes to tell right from wrong, he'd gotten the money from selling my horse, and I knew I needed to buy her back. And I knew the money was more likely to go to liquor than biscuits. But I could feel my mama's eyes on me, watching, and my papa's. I wanted to do him proud, but right and wrong were lost in the dark of the cabin. I clenched my teeth. A man's only as good as B treats his enemy, Papa had said. My hand slid back into my bag and found the 8 $10 bills. $80? Damn. I pulled one out and set it on the handle of the axe, leaning by the door. "There you go, sir. I'll be going now. You won't be seeing me again." I was mostly out the door when he whined his parting words. "He's long gone, you know. He's at least 12 hours ahead. With you on foot and him riding, you'll never catch him, boy." My teeth ground hard against each other. I lowered the gun and looked him straight in his stubbly face. "I will, sir," I said. "I will get her back." I let the door close behind me. and without a look back, I walked off as quick as I could through the darkness. The sky beyond the hills was just beginning to grow pale with the coming day. The angels, okay. The angels and the devils could all go to sleep now. But I sure enough hoped that one angel would stay up and keep by my side. The grass and the stones and the dirt ruts of the road were covered in an icy white blanket of morning frost, and my boots crunched with each step. I'm coming for you, sweet Sarah girl, I thought to myself. I would find her and I would get her back. I knew I would, or I'd sure enough die trying. Okay, we're gonna read chapter 2 as well, because chapter 1 is also a pretty short chapter. So let's get into reading it. Chapter 2. I made good time downriver, my feet eating up miles as fast as my legs would move them. By the time the whole round sun sat in the sky, I was already halfway to 𝒢ℯ𝓃𝒽𝒶𝓇𝓉, where I'd hoped to catch the man who had my horse. The leaves on the tree by the river were already into their fall changing, painting my path with all their reds and yellows and oranges. Funny how them colors are thought to be such a beautiful thing, when what it really amounts to is their dyeing. It was pretty though anyways. Puffy pink sunrise clouds hung in the sky above the foothills of the mountains that crowded all around me and the river. It was the kind of sight that would have made Mama put her hand to her cheek and say, "Oh, bless the world for its beauty." I did raise my head to take it from time to time for her sake, but I kept my hand on the bulge of the gun in my satchel. The world sure enough ain't all beauty. I was still trying to get my head around how Mr. Grissom had sold my Sarah away from me. I should have known. I kicked myself for not seeing it, for not getting suspicious at the way he and the stranger, Mr. Ezra Bishop, had been talking. How they'd whisper and hush when I came around. It had been strange, but I reckon I knew better than to question or bother Mr. Grissom. And then he'd set me off on that fool's errand to check his stock pens up on the ridge. By the time I'd gotten back, Ezra Bishop and his string of ponies were gone, and night was coming on. I'd done my normal chores and duties, and it wasn't till after dinner when Mr. Grissom was halfway into his first bottle that I'd gone out to feed and brush Sarah and found her stall empty. What? Her stall was empty? Damn. My heart burned with a fierce kind of anger. I kicked at the rocks in the ruts, spitting mad just thinking about it. My sweet girl Sarah. She was all I had left in the world. I shook my head and cut away from the road, through the brush down to the river. The 𝒢ℯ𝓃𝒽𝒶𝓇𝓉 River was calm here, flowing smooth and quiet down to the mighty Columbia. I knelt on the smooth round stones of her bank and scooped the water up to my mouth with both hands, my ears filled with the gentle near and far sound of the water as it bubbled round rocks and tumbled its way over little dips. "That's the voice of the river," I could hear Mom's voice say. "A river tells a different story to every living soul. I got one just for you, Joseph, if you listen." I couldn't help but wonder what kind of story the river was telling me now, as I was heading alone down this road with a gun in my satchel and a grudge in my heart. I didn't know if I would like it, or if I'd like the ending. I drank my fill in slurping handfuls, but the water had lost some of its sweetness. It wasn't until I stood up and turned back toward the road that I saw the great pine just in the distance, the one standing watch over the small grassy clearing dotted with crude stones and wooden crosses. I darn near missed it. I'd sure enough been lost in my thoughts, thoughts of what had happened and what might be coming. I darn near missed it. I looked down the road toward 𝒢ℯ𝓃𝒽𝒾𝓃𝓽. I didn't have any time to lose, but I reckon a few times more wouldn't weigh much against the hours I had to wait to make up. And if I really wasn't coming back, I knew there were no way I could leave without saying goodbye to Papa. My anger melted away like the morning frost as I made my way over to the little graveyard. There were only a handful of graves, lovingly but clumsily marked. I knew right where his grave was, there in the knee-high grass. I'd visited it enough times in the months since he died. Any time I could find when Mr. Grissom would let me slip away. It weren't even a cross, just a wooden marker cut from an old door. I had no real money and no way to get anything better. I'd carved the words into the wood myself. William Johnson, it said. William Johnson. It said 1855 to 1890. That was it. I run out of room. There was not too much to say, far too much to fit on that old board. I could have had a forest of boards for carving and not had enough space to say everything that was in my heart. Hey, Papa, I whispered, looking down at his grave. There weren't no breeze and the grass stood still, like it were listening. Well, I'm off. Mr. Grissom done sold Sarah off, and I aim to get her back. I don't know what I'll ever be coming back here. I don't know that I'll ever be coming back here. I blew out a bitter breath and looked away from his leaning board. It sure enough didn't feel right leaving him here with this sorry marker, with no family around to lay flowers or remember him. But I suppose leaving graves behind is just something you do in this life until you get to your own. I rubbed at my nose and sniffled. I won't never forget nothing you told me, Papa. I'll make you proud, I swear, and promise that I will. I took just one breath to calm the hard lump in my throat. I weren't going to say my last words to Papa like a crying little boy. I was his son, and I aimed to live up to that. I sniffed again and nodded. Yes, sir. There are things that have to be done in this world, and it's our duty to do them right, like you always said. And I intend to do this, and do it right. I bent down and yanked up some grass that had grown too long, nearly covering his name. I saw a little stone there, round and white, resting up against his grave marker. I picked it up and slipped it into my pocket. Goodbye, Papa, I said, and then turned and walked away. I knew the names of the folks in the few scattered homesteads and cabins I passed, some right on the wagon road and some farther away, tucked up by the hills. It was full morning now, and the twists of smoke curled from the chimneys or pipes of most of the homes. There were some sounds where and there of chopping wood or other labor, but I didn't slow or stop, not until Frank Jameson's place anyways. It was right there by the road. He was sitting on a stump eating, and he saw me coming. Morning, Joseph, he said as I walked up. He wiped his hand on his pants and held it out to me to shake. I smelt the sweet breakfast smell of his pancakes, and my mouth went right to watering. But I bit my tongue and shook his hand. Morning, Mr. Jameson. Mr. Grissom's got you out on the trail early today, don't he? What business he got you on? It's business on my own today, sir. Me and Mr. Grissom have parted a ways. Excuse me. Mr. Jameson's eyebrows went up. That's right. That right? Well, that's much more in your favor than his. The sun was still rising higher, and I felt the trail pulling me on, so I cut right to it. Did a man pass through here last night, sir? A Mr. Bishop with a string of ponies? Mr. Jameson poked at some food in his cheek with his tongue and nodded. Uh-huh, he said. A couple hours before sunset, heading down 𝒢ℯ𝓃𝒽𝒾𝓃𝓽 way. he said. Asked if I had any horses to sell. He squinched up one eye and looked at me. I could have swore I saw that Indian filly of yours in there with his Joseph, the red and white paint. I gritted my teeth and nodded. Yes, sir, Mr. Grissom. I had to stop for a step to keep my anger down and my words civil. Mr. Grissom sold her in my absence, and I aimed to catch up to Mr. Bishop and buy her back. The muscles in Mr. Jameson's jaw tightened with an angry ripple. Sold you horse? That old cuss sold you a horse? Yes, sir, but I reckon I'll find Mr. Bishop in the Wenatchee and have it all straightened out by lunchtime. Well, yeah, I do hope so, Joseph. Thank you, sir. I'd best be going. I was set to leave, but a thought had been nagging me all morning and had to put it to rest. I reached into my satchel, pulled out my papa's pistol, and held it out to Mr. Jameson's grip for, Could you please return this to Mr. Grissom, sir, next time you see him? Ain't that your papa's pistol? Yes, sir. Well, it was, and I felt I had the right to take it. But I reckon I changed my mind. My papa said if Mr. Grissom were to take care of me, all our supplies and goods were his. I suppose that includes his gun along with the rest. I locked my eyes on Mr. Jameson's, trying to keep the sounds and sights of my papa's death out of my mind. They came back to me sometimes too strong, and I needed to keep myself steady. But I'd never forget that awful day, the wagon jerking and turning over, rolling down that hill, my papa crushed beneath it, the hours of sitting there watching him die, with no doctor and nothing to be done, the tears that had leaked stubbornly from his eyes, his ragged whisper over and over, I'm sorry, son, I'm so sorry. Mr. Grissom had come along, heading to his measly cabin, and I suppose he'd done his best to help. But there was no helping what was wrong with my papa. My papa'd known it. With his last breaths, he'd begged Mr. Grissom to take care for me, and promised him all our homesteading goods. I shook my head to chase them clinging ghosts away. Mr. Jameson looked angry, but I knew his anger weren't for me. No, son, I aim to give Mr. Grissom something next time I see him, but it ain't gonna be your papa's gun. That is yours, Joseph. It was your papa's, and now it's yours. True as anything. I wouldn't call what that dog did taking care of you, neither. More like taking advantage. His eyes narrowed and his voice got lower. Listen, son, you may need that gun up ahead, Mr. Bishop seemed in a hurry, and he's on horseback. You may have to chase him up and over the mountains. There's bears up there, and plenty of rattlesnakes. And you, 12? I'll be 13 in February, sir. I ain't no boy. Mr. Jameson nodded. Maybe not, but you ain't quite a man yet, neither. And this ain't always friendly country. He pushed his gun back toward me. You take that and you feel good about it. Your papa would want you to. His last words got me. I bit my lip and slid the gun back into my satchel. Now you listen, Mr. Jason continued. You be real careful with that Ezra Bishop fella. He had an ugly way about him, and he's got a bad name around here. You keep your wits about you, and don't give him a red cent till he hands you the bridle to that pony of yours. Yes, sir, all right. Hold on a bit, he said, then disappeared into his cabin. He came back out with a handkerchief tied in a bundle. There's 2 pancakes in here, a piece of salt pork. Eat it as you walk. I opened my mouth to protest, but he held up his hand. No use fighting. I ain't sending you off with an empty stomach. Thank you, sir. I sure do. I know. Now, get going. You've got a lot ahead of you. I was only a few paces down the road when he called out. She didn't want to leave you, you know, sir. Your horse, what's her name? Sarah, I said, turning back. Right. while she was fighting him the whole way, jerking and pulling, trying to get back to you. Never seen a broke horse fight like that. It was everything he could keep her going. Madder than a hornet he was. His last words hung with a warning behind him, like he was trying to tell me something, but was afraid to. My hands clenched into fists. Was he whipping her, I asked. Was he whipping my horse, Mr. Jameson? My voice was winter steel, cold and hard. Mr. Jameson licked his lips and squinted, then nodded. Yes, son. His arm is gonna be clean wore off by the time he gets to Wenatchee. He was whipping her so hard to keep her moving. My fingernails bit like rabid dogs in my palms. My breath shook through my nostrils. I didn't trust my voice to talk or my heart to say any words my mama would have approved of. Ezra Bishop was whipping my horse? He was whipping my sweet Sarah? I turned and marched quick and dark as thunder toward Wenatchee, glad for the gun I carried. So this is a really good story, but again, it has pretty inappropriate things. I have never read this book before. Never in my life. So I'm gonna continue reading it just because I don't want to stop reading it just because it's inappropriate. Because it is a bad country. But anyways, tomorrow we can also read more chapters together. I can't read like a lot of chapters at the same time. So I really hope you guys like it and enjoy it. And again, this is Some Kind of Courage by Dan Grimmenhart, and I hope you have the best of your day, or the best of your night, or the best of your evening, or the best of your morning. Okay. I hope you enjoyed the story, and I will see you next time when we do our other chapters.